1,500 pages, hundreds of characters, months of reading for me personally because I took my time over it. Was it worth it? I'm going to talk about A Suitable Boy by Vikram Seth. I'm Jack, this is Spread Book Joy, and this novel is one of the longest novels published in English in one continuous volume, and it is published in 1993, I believe, by the author Vikram Seth, and it is a novel about India between 1950 and 1952. It's set just post-independence, post-partition, and just as India is about to go to the polls in their very first general election post-independence from Britain. So it's a novel set at a very turbulent, very vibrant, very exciting time in Indian history, but also one which was crucial to the development of the country as a democracy, and that's the backdrop of this novel. So this edition I bought back in around 1996 or 1997 when I first read it, so this is the second time I've read this book. I remember the first time I read it, I was absolutely swept away by the sense of time and place in this novel. If you want to read about India and the social, political, religious conflicts and issues of that time, then this is a fantastic book. Amazingly researched, amazingly detailed, and yeah, I just remember when I read it the first time being swept up in the time and the place that the book is set. Second time I read it, I started reading it again this year in January as part of a reading group. I've wanted to reread it for years. I've really wanted to, just to see if it stood up to my memories, my vague memories of it. The first time I read it, I was quite a prolific reader back then, and I would just read all the time, and I read it. I think it took me about 2 weeks to read it, or maybe less, a week and a half, because I used to just read all the time. That was all I would do when I wasn't working or studying. So yeah, it didn't take me that long to read it the first time around. So I feel like I probably didn't absorb it as well as I would have done taking a slow read. So at the end of last year, Lindy from Lindy's Magpie Read and Jolene from Bookroom Adventure Girl said they were going to do a group read of A Suitable Boy, and they were going to read one part per week, which would take them into May, June time, because there are 19 sections in this book. So it was quite a nice way to section it up and read it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a bit about the book. I'm going to talk about the way it's structured. I'm going to talk a bit about the plot and the characters. I'm also going to give some sort of tips for reading it, because it is quite a long book, and there are so many characters and so many things to follow. So my way of reading it the second time round, I felt, was so much more rewarding, and I got a lot out of reading it. My question at the start, is it worth it? I believe so, but there are certain people I know will definitely not enjoy it. So I'm going to talk to you about, if you enjoy certain types of books and writing, who might enjoy A Suitable Boy. I'm also going to put this down because it's really heavy, so I'm not going to hold it up throughout the whole video, but I'm going to put it to one side in case I want to read anything from it. So first of all, the book is structured into 19 parts, and each part at the start has a rhyming couplet in the contents that introduces the part. And once you've read that section, the rhyming couplets tend to have much more meaning. I think Milton used it for Paradise Lost, these rhyming couplets to almost summarise these sections of the story. So we are set a backdrop of 1950 to 1952 India, and we follow 4 families. So whilst the title A Suitable Boy alludes to the fact that one of the characters, Lata, who we think of as the main character, though there are a number of characters and I'll get to that in a moment, Lata is being told by her mother she's 19 years old and mum wants to find her a suitable boy to marry. So that's what the title A Suitable Boy comes from. And so we meet Lata and her mother and the rest of her family in the opening scene, which is her sister Savita's wedding, and Savita is marrying a man called Pran. So Savita and Lata's family are the Mehra family, and the Pran is from the Kapoor family, and these families are they're getting married and joining the families together. And so these extended families are the ones that two of the families that we follow. We also follow Lata's eldest brother Arun and his wife Meenakshi, who live in Calcutta, and their Meenakshi's family, the Chatterjees, is one of the other families. And then Pran's family, the Kapoors, his younger brother Man, who is, I would say, one of the other real main protagonists in this story. Man's family is friends with a family called the Khans. So we have 4 kind of prominent families, and intermingled with these families are various characters that come in and out of their lives. They are friends, colleagues, people who work for them, people who are, because we'll talk about the feudal system that's still, that there's sort of land reform going on within the novel, because there's still quite a feudal system of land ownership. So you get various characters coming in and out, basically from different levels of society. The Khans, they are Muslim as well, and the rest of the families are Hindu. The only daughter of the Kapoors is married to into a family who have escaped partition and are now living in the fictional city of Brampur, where the wedding takes place, where Lata is at university, and where this initial opening scene happens. We follow the various characters across the 18 months, with this thread running through it of Lata's mother trying to find a suitable boy for Lata, and her various family members are dragged into this. And then we also then just follow a few other characters in quite some detail around their lives and how their lives unfold over the next 18 months. It's a really complex, rich, detailed novel. I found it engrossing and engaging and episodic in a way, because it's not one single plot. We've got lots and lots of plots, we've got lots and lots of stories, and we have enough social, political, religious detail to really enrich the story and make us recognise what's going on in India at that time. So my advice to you when you pick up A Suitable Boy is not to think about it as something that is fast paced. It is not a fast paced book there are lots of events that happen within the book, but it is more character driven and about these characters' development, and the setting itself is of course hugely important. And we have these various points where, because of the different roles of the heads of these 4 families, one is a judge, one is a landowner, one is a minister, an MP, so he's a politician. We kind of get quite a lot of detail about, through these characters, the political shape of things and how these different reforms that politicians are trying to bring in to distribute the land in a more fair way, and the effect this has from the very top, where we have these wealthy landowners and these some royal characters as well, and the effect it's going to have on them, and how that trickles down through to the sort of middle classes, and then to the sort of like peasant castes who are working the land. We also get glimpses into some of the real squalor that some people are living in. One of the characters is in the shoe business, in the shoe industry, and so we get to go and visit some of the characters who are working in sort of tanning and producing the leather, and all of those jobs that were deemed to be too filthy or dirty and were looked down upon and were sort of left to other castes. And those castes, the way they're treated, and the fact that there is no social mobility because of who you are, what family you come from, where you're born. You cannot, it's a very rigid social structure within India at that time that is displayed within the book. So it's a really interesting look at that. So we get quite a bit of historical detail. We get an awful lot of fantastic humour within the book. The characters are brilliantly drawn, and they're really well realised, and just quite a lot of fun to read for some of them, especially Mrs. Rupa Mehra, who is Lata's mother. I think her dialogue with her children is very humorous, and I just found the whole thing quite charming to read. I think if you like Austen, if you like sort of comedy of manners style books, then A Suitable Boy is a really excellent read. If you've read A War and Peace, I feel like it's very comparable to War and Peace in that structure. It's following quite a number of families whose lives are intertwined, who are connected in some way, and characters within those families, and we just see their lives unfold with the backdrop of something huge happening, because this is the first general election since India gained independence from Britain, and it is huge. It's a massive country with a big democratic process about to happen, and they're finding their feet with they're sort of the political parties that are emerging post-independence, and they've had this really violent splitting of the country during partition. So this is a fascinating, engaging sort of period of history for India, and much like War and Peace, A Suitable Boy starts with a party where we are introduced to quite a lot of the main players. So it's really interesting, the sort of parallels drawn between War and Peace and A Suitable Boy. I've read both, and I've got a video on War and Peace if you're interested in reading War and Peace, my thoughts on that. But I found that both stories are really comparable in their sort of structure, and the fact that we're following this huge cast of characters with this huge epic historical backdrop. I really enjoyed Seth's writing. I like Seth's writing. I think there's been some criticisms when I looked up some people's reviews who didn't like A Suitable Boy on Goodreads, and I looked up some other things. Some people don't enjoy it because it's not hugely fast paced, it's very character driven, and there is an awful lot of detail sometimes about certain political factions and riots and various things that are going on in the background. When I read War and Peace, there was a lot of detail about the campaigns and the war and everything, which I didn't quite care for. I found the political details in A Suitable Boy fascinating because I actually like that kind of thing, though I think a lot of people who don't like A Suitable Boy really don't enjoy those parts. If you really like character driven books where the focus is on these interactions between the characters, very much like Austen, because it's not purple prose. Vikram Seth is not writing, it's not sort of full of figurative language and metaphors and things like that. It's not. It's very straightforward. I suppose you could like kind of realistic writing, then I think you'll enjoy it. And he's been criticised for not being hugely descriptive. I did find it quite descriptive. So there was a description, for instance, I'm just going to read you, of the city of Brampur, which I really particularly enjoyed in the opening part. And I've probably mentioned this already in the video, but Brampur is the fictional city that he has set this in. But there are other cities that the characters travel to throughout, which are real places. So on page 35 in part 1, several months had now passed since Savita's wedding. Winter had gone, and the pythons in the zoo had emerged from hibernation. Roses had replaced narcissi, and had been replaced in their turn by the purple-wreathed creeper, whose 5-bladed flowers helicoptered gently to the ground in the hot breeze. The broad, silty brown Ganga flowed due east past the ugly chimneys of the tannery and the marble edifice of the Barsat Mahal, past old Brampur with its crowded bazaars and alleys, temples and mosques, past the bathing ghats and the cremation ghat and the Brampur fort, past the whitewashed pillars of the Subzipur Club and the spacious estate of the university, had shrunken with the summer, but boats and steamers still plied busily up and down its length, as did trains along the parallel rail line that bounded Brampur to the south. So I think it was quite descriptive actually, and I felt that some of the sort of claims within some people's reviews that it was, it's not, the prose isn't that beautiful, or it's not that descriptive. In some ways, yes, he's not terribly descriptive. He's more about the characters and their lives, but I did find it descriptive enough that I was immersed fully in this world, in this fictional Indian city from the 1950s. So overall, would I recommend reading A Suitable Boy? Yes, I would. I would highly recommend it. I absolutely loved this reread of the book. It's the sort of book that I would enjoy just sitting with and just letting it wash over me, and not worrying about how long it's going to take me to read it, and not thinking I've got to get through it, or it's not pacey. It is just immersing yourself in this world for a little while with these characters. And if you like that kind of book, if you like Austen, if you enjoyed War and Peace, if you enjoyed these sort of books where it's not about this pace, it's not about a single storyline or several, it's about quite a few and a cast of characters and a huge kind of historical backdrop, then definitely give A Suitable Boy a go. I found the sort of, for me, the historical details, the political, social, cultural details were really fascinating. The characters are engrossing and interesting and fascinating, and I found the sort of explorations of the turmoil that this country was going through, the conflicts between Hindus and Muslims, between tradition and modernity, and between the sort of internal conflicts a lot of these characters have around the fact that being Indian but having sort of quite this reverence for sort of still reverence for this kind of English culture that's been imposed upon this country for centuries, and then the fact that there's a bit of internalized racism going on because of that, because English is still held, the language of English is still held in such reverence in the business world, in the government and everything else. So it was really fascinating. I found that aspect really, really fascinating as well. The audiobook I would highly recommend. It is 68 hours long, but it is brilliantly read. There was no unabridged version of A Suitable Boy until about 3 years ago. There was a version released on Audible. I don't know if it's on other, I'm assuming it is on other things, but it might be an Audible exclusive. But it was brilliantly read. I'll put the name of the audiobook narrator up, but he brought the entire cast of characters to life and just added that kind of authenticity in terms of the pronunciation of the names, etc., etc. So it was really fantastic, and I sort of read and listened, so I kind of did a bit of both, and I found that a really pleasurable experience. And it was almost like listening to a constant ongoing radio play or soap opera in a way, because it was just this kind of story that's just unfolding, and you just come back to this character or introduced to a new character, and I just found it really fascinating. I am going to try and rewatch. I started watching and then didn't watch any more of it, the BBC adaptation, which was on about 2-3 years ago, and I think it's on iPlayer here in the UK, so I'm going to try and give that a go. So if you do read A Suitable Boy, or you have read A Suitable Boy, please let me know in the comments what you think of it, if you fancy reading it after my review. If you want to get yourself a copy of A Suitable Boy, I also had it on Kindle because I like reading my old copy, and I was reading it physically with this when I had somewhere to rest the book because it's quite heavy, but I also had a Kindle copy. But if you want to get a copy of it, if you prefer reading in paperback, you can get it in 2 volumes, or used to be able to anyway. I have a referral code for the online book retailer Books Please. If you use the code SpreadBookJoy at the checkout, you'll get 5% off if you want to use that. I also get a small percentage, which is no extra cost to you, which helps me kind of run the channel and do other things and supports the channel. So if you want to use that, that's in the description box for you. And if you've never been here before, if you want to watch my review of War and Peace, you're welcome to do that. I'll link that in the description box. And if you've never been here before and you're considering subscribing, maybe stick around, and hopefully I'll see you again here soon. Bye.